I'm really excited for this pantry makeover and I hope you are too. Today I am going to take you on the journey with me as I transform my pantry space into something that's stylish and also functional. If you don't know me, I'm Jade and I'm here to help you create a home you love on a budget. So let's dive into this makeover. I'm really lucky to have such a large pantry space. Now that you've seen them before, you'll see that there is quite a lot of storage here. However, it's just a whole lot of clutter. I don't have any kind of organization to this space. And I also wanted to add some dramatic impact with the styling in the space. To get started on the makeover, I simply removed everything out of my pantry and then started to give a deep clean to all of the shelves. You'll find that there's a lot of dust that accumulates in between the food, and even if you've got baskets, it will all just kind of gather dust in the pantry. I gave the floor a nice quick vacuum, and then I also had to give the walls a clean before I could attend to painting them. The only reason you really need to clean the walls is to make sure there's no dust or dirt on the walls that's going to stop the paint from sticking properly. Now it is time to apply this stunning wallpaper. Before I could apply it, I needed to mix up the wallpaper paste. I added the water with the paste, gave it a really good stir, let it sit for 3 minutes and came back to make sure that there was no chunks, and then I was ready to go. When you're applying wallpaper, the most important part is getting the first piece of wallpaper level, because every other piece of wallpaper that you apply to the wall is then going to join up to this piece, and if this first piece is not level, all of the other pieces won't be as well. I personally use my laser level and used that as a guide as I was installing that first piece of paper to make sure that it was straight and level. If you don't have a laser level, you can do this with a measuring tape. You're just going to measure across and mark a whole lot of little lines down the wall and make sure that all of those lines line up with that first piece of wallpaper as you're installing it. Because I had a huge amount of shelves in my pantry space, it did make the wallpaper installation a little bit more difficult than if I was installing a nice straight wall. If this is the first time you are using wallpaper, I recommend you try the wallpaper out on a nice big straight wall where it is easy and you can just cut the wallpaper at the top and the bottom and you don't need to make all these intricate cuts. I decided that I was going to work my way through from top to bottom, installing the first row of wallpaper and cutting that down to size. It was then going to be a little bit easier when I started to install the second sheet of wallpaper to line it up and make sure that my pattern matched properly. Once I had the entire first row of wallpaper installed, I could then start working through wherever it is that I wanted to. So I then went across the top and installed the wallpaper on the entire top section of the pantry shelves, and then started my way back through, lining up with each of the next shelves, matching up the pattern as I went. If you've got any PowerPoints, you will need to cut the wallpaper around the PowerPoint. You'll see here I'm using the guide and then my little razor blade to cut out that little section where the PowerPoint goes. When you're installing wallpaper, it's really important that you have the right tools. As with anything you do, using the right tools is going to give you a much nicer finish. So for this particular wallpaper installation, I've got a metal guide that I'm using to push the wallpaper right up to the edges. And then I've got a razor blade that I'm using to cut those edges off and cut any excess so that I get a really nice flat flush finish. You can also use a wallpaper brush that's going to be used on the outside of the wallpaper that's going to smooth the wallpaper down as you install it. I personally prefer to do this with my hand, so I put the wallpaper on the wall and then I just rub that in with my hand ever so slightly. If you have difficulties with the joins, you can also buy a little roller that helps roll out those joins. Now it's time to get painting. I've got two bold colors that I have chosen for this particular makeover. One of them is a beautiful green that is called Slender Pine. It's a really light sage green color, and the other color I'm using is a color called Monument, which is almost black. I decided to paint the two ends of the pantry in the green color and then the back wall of the pantry in the black. Because the two ends of the pantry were quite small spaces and they were quite intricate in that I needed to cut in around all of those shelves, I decided it was just going to be easier to apply the paint to those sections with a paintbrush and a mini roller. I worked my way through painting all of the first coat on the sections that needed to be green. I did the two ends of the pantry, and then I also did this end wall where the window is. It was just going to be another section that was a nice contrast up against the black, and I didn't want to have too much of the dark color because the pantry space is quite a compact enclosed space, and I didn't want to have too much of the dark paint and make it feel like it was too small. Once I finished the first coat on all of the green, I then moved on to doing the first coat of this dark wall. For some reason, I actually like to put a lot of my kids' ornaments in my pantry, and that tends to be where it is that I showcase and display those. And this black back wall is going to be a really nice backdrop to display some of those artworks on. When painting, I personally like to cut in up against the cornice and also against the cabinetry, but if you don't have very much painting experience, I would recommend using masking tape to protect all of those areas. Once I finished painting the first coat, I let it all dry for the required amount of time, and then I came back to apply the second coat. Whatever paint it is that you're using, just make sure that you check on the back of the tin what the required drying time is between coats of paint, because that will differ between different paint brands. Then once I finished the second coat on all of the black, I then proceeded to apply the second coat on all of the green.
There were days where we thought we wouldn't make it out, but we stuck it out. Today's our day. Today's our day. There were nights we would fight, no end in sight, nothing was right. Tonight's our night. Tonight's our night. I'll fight for you until this life is over. There's no giving up here, babe. We'll make it out and fall in love tonight. Ain't nothing needed but us feeling right. Just take a chance, we got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me, we were meant to be. We were meant to be. We were meant to be. There were times when we found it, fell back in love, the best still to come. Our time is now. Our time is now. I'll fight for you until this life is over. There's no giving up here, babe.
Once all the painting was finished, it was time to install some of the finishing touches. What I wanted to do is apply a beautiful hardwood timber frame to the front of the laminate shelves. So I purchased some lengths of Tasmanian oak timber, and then I used my drop saw to cut them down to size so that they would fit perfectly in the shelving between the two walls. Once they were all cut down to size, I then went along the front of the shelves and applied some liquid nails. This was going to help hold that in place while I then used my nail gun to go along and put a nail through the timber into the shelving to hold that securely in place. When doing this, you just want to make sure that your nails are not too long, And you want to be careful on the angle that you're putting the nails in, because you don't want them to then come through the shelving and be noticeable or get in the way when you're using the pantry. Once the first piece of timber was installed, I just went through and repeated the process on each of the other shelves, applying the liquid nails, sitting the timber in place, and then using my nail gun to apply that timber onto the shelving. If you wanted to take this one step further, you could get some more timber, which you would cut down to size and put on top of the laminate shelves, which would then completely cover the laminate altogether. But even just applying this timber fronting to these laminate shelves is just going to take them to the next level and make them look so much more professional than just the laminate by itself. Once they were all installed, I wanted to try and fill in the nail holes as close as possible to the timber because I'm leaving them all raw exposed. So I grabbed some Tasmanian oak wood filler and used that to fill all of those holes. I let the wood filler all dry and then came back in with a 120 grit piece of sandpaper and sanded off all of the excess wood filler until it was completely flush and you couldn't notice where those nail holes were. I cleaned off all of the sanding dust and then I grubbed out some clear varnish that I'm going to be applying over the top of this timber panel. Because these are just a raw hardwood timber, they do need to have a clear coat for protection and durability, and also it's going to make it so much easier if anything gets spilt on this timber, because then I can just wipe it off. I chose to use an oil-based polyurethane because this is the most durable, but it did mean that I needed to give it 8 hours to dry in between each coat, and I applied 3 coats in total. Now all of the renovations have been completed, the wallpaper's installed, the painting's all been done, I've applied this beautiful timber to the front of the shelves, and it is now ready to start getting organized. But I wanted to show you what the end result was before I organized the pantry so you could see the complete makeover. Transformation with you. If you want any more information about any of the products that I used to complete the makeover, or any of the containers that I used for the organization and storage, they are all linked down in the description below.
taking all that's left.
Now it's time to check out this amazing $300 laundry transformation next.